We want to welcome you to another Family and Friends Sunday. We do this 4 times a year. It's our opportunity to share with our family members, our friends, co-workers, some of the good things that the Lord is doing here at Westside Bible Baptist Church. And the title of the message, as Greg has already pointed out, is Dealing with Disappointment. And we will be looking at Joseph in the Old Testament to help us to unpack this. But let me begin this way. Perhaps you've gone to a wedding recently and you listened to the vows, and maybe you started thinking about your own marriage. For better or for worse? I sure lost on that deal. It's only been for worse. I thought that I was marrying for better, for richer, or for poorer. Well, my spouse doesn't make much money. We're struggling financially. I thought that we would be living in the house of my dreams instead of this rental. I was hoping to be able to trade in cars every 3 years. Instead, I drive this clunker that I have to pray will run until my next paycheck. So disappointed. In sickness and in health, my spouse has all kinds of health issues. We have a full medicine cabinet with a rainbow of pills and a drawer full of Bengay icy hot Salonpas, a heating pad, a foot massager under the bed. What happened to that shapely, healthy person I married? I'm so disappointed. Maybe you got good grades in high school and you got a scholarship to go to college. You stuck it out and you got your degree. You went to work for a big company hoping to work your way up the ladder. But with the economic downturn in 2008, you were faced with a choice that you thought you would never have to make. Either take on more responsibilities with the same pay or keep your same job with less pay. Your dreams of a promotion with the company went out the window. You are disappointed. Maybe you made out a birthday or Christmas list, like my kids used to do, and gave it to your parents. You put the 3 main gifts that you just had to have on that list. But when you open up the presents on that day, you receive clothes that aren't your style, some books, and a couple of board games. You had high hopes about the gifts that you thought you were going to get, but instead, you were disappointed. Has disappointment come to you recently? It could be a mild, small disappointment, like, I know you may think that I'm crazy, but every birthday, October 8th, I hope that the temperature will be at least 60 degrees. That may not be a big thing for you, but October, I just want that warm weather to continue. And if I can have 60 degrees on my birthday, it means I don't have to wear a coat. Well, this past October 8th, it was 58 degrees, and I said, Lord, I'm so disappointed. I mean, that's a little thing. We have small disappointments, but we also have those big, big disappointments in life when things just don't go the way that you planned. So I ask you again, has some disappointment come into your life recently? Some are easy to get over while others drive us to the point of despair. Joseph in the Old Testament was very familiar with disappointment. Indeed, he seemed to go from one disappointment to another, but he never grew bitter. We can learn how to deal with our own disappointments in life by looking at Joseph's life. And so the message entitled Dealing with Disappointment takes us back to the book of Genesis. Genesis chapter 37, verses 5 through 11, as we look for our first point. Genesis 37, verses 5 through 11. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, "Please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And indeed, your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf." And his brothers said to him, "Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Look, I have dreamed another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me." So he told it to his father and his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?" And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. I want to submit to you the disappointment of being misunderstood. The disappointment of being misunderstood. Joseph has a dream about his greatness. And whether he was naive as a 17-year-old or really trying to stick it to his brothers, he shares the dream with them. Now, they already don't like him because they know that he is the favorite child. His father's given him this coat of many colors, and so wherever Joseph goes, he sticks out. And his clothing is a constant reminder that Jacob loves Joseph the most. Now, if you have sisters and brothers, you know something about sibling rivalry. And maybe growing up, you would ask your parents, "Who do you love more?" And the wise parent would say, "I love you both the same. I love you equal, you know." But sometimes our actions might betray something else. Well, there was no problem here. Jacob made it very plain that he loved Joseph above his brothers. And so you have Joseph here who knows that he is the favorite son, but also knows that he is not liked by his brothers. He's going to tell them this dream. And in this dream, he is ruler over his brothers. Now, I ask you again, does that make a whole lot of sense to do? When you're already in a family situation that's strained and stressed and people don't like you? Maybe he was naive, but he shares it with them, and they make fun of him. They don't understand the dream. Oh, they interpreted it correctly, but they don't understand this dream. And they say, you will not reign over us. You're the next or the youngest in the family. What makes you think that you're going to be our ruler? There's no way that's going to happen. Then he has his second dream where the sun, the moon, and the stars, 11 stars, bow down before him. And he tells it to his father as well as his brothers. And so his father said, "Boy, what's wrong with you? You think your mother and I are going to bow down before you? I'm the patriarch of this family. Where do you get off having a dream like this?" But notice, in both cases, all he did was share the dream. He didn't interpret the dream for them, but they understood what it meant. And so, it's obvious that Joseph is being misunderstood here. Let me ask you a question. Have other people stepped on your dreams? Has God given you something, some kind of vision of what your life could be, and somebody says, "Oh, yeah, that'll never happen to you. You're no good. Your daddy was no good. Your granddaddy was no good, so you can't be any good. It's not going to happen. You know, people will sometimes step on your dreams because they don't understand. They misunderstand your dreams. But if God has given you a dream, hold on to it. Sometimes when you share your dreams, you share your ideas with somebody, they want to ridicule you. They want to make fun of you. But in all of this, Joseph still believed in the dreams. But there's a second disappointment that comes into Joseph's life, beginning at verse 12 of Genesis chapter 37, 12 through 14, and then verses 18 through 28. Then his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." So he said to him, "Here I am." Then he said to him, "Please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me." So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Verse 18. Now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. Then they said to one another, "Look, the dreamer is coming. Come, therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit, and we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams." But Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, "Let us not kill him." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father." So it came to pass, when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him. Then they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. And they sat down to eat a meal. Then they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carry them down to Egypt. So Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." And his brothers listened. Then Midianite traders passed by, so the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. I want to submit to you that Joseph dealt with the disappointment of family. The disappointment of family. Jacob sends Joseph to go check on his brothers. Maybe these guys were known to be lazy every now and then, and Jacob wanted to make sure that they were doing their job. So he sends Joseph. But why send Joseph? You're only sending him into a problem. You're sending him into a world of hurt. Here he comes, afar off, they recognize him. You know why? Because of his coat. They see that neon flashing coat of many colors. Here he comes. We know that Dad has sent him to not check on us, but to spy on us and go back and tell Dad that we're not doing our job, that we're being lazy. And so they get their heads together. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Let's get rid of him. Let's get rid of this dreamer. See, that dream was still on their minds. You know, he says that one day he's going to be great and ruler over us. Well, that's not going to happen if he's dead. So let's get rid of him. Let's kill the dreamer. And if you kill the dreamer, you kill the dream. But Reuben, for reasons we won't get into today, he wants to spare his brother. Reuben is the oldest of the 12. And he said, well, let's not kill him. let's just throw him in a pit. We don't want his blood on our hands. But his plan was later when his other knucklehead brothers, maybe when they were sleepy or got drunk or whatever, he was going to pull them up out of the pit and take them back home. That was his plan, but it didn't work out that way. What they did was they grabbed him. The first thing they did was take that coat off. They ripped that coat off of him and threw him into the pit. Now, what happened while he was in the pit? Joseph was crying out to his brothers to get him out of the pit. Do you believe me? Well, you shouldn't. You should say, where's the proof? Genesis chapter 42, verse 21 says, this is later after Joseph has risen to be the second in command in Egypt, and his brothers come to Egypt for some grain. They begin to have some concerns about what's going on. And verse 21 in Genesis 42 says, then they said to one another, we are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore, this distress has come upon us. They threw him in the pit. Now, we're told in this passage in chapter 37 that they sat down and ate. Now, they were eating, and he's crying out to his brothers. And maybe he called each one by name. Reuben, help me. Simeon, help me. Levi, all the way down the list. And they wouldn't hear him. That's heartless, isn't it? You know, they not only ignore his cries, but they sell him into slavery. They decided they would not harm him, but they say, you know, we should make some money off of this deal. Let's get some money at least. We'll sell him into slavery. We will never see him again. And how is he going to reign over us if he's not even around us? But let me tell you something. Even though his brothers did these things to him, Joseph never hated his brothers. He never hated his brothers. Let me say to you, family is a place where we should feel the safest. But that's not always the case. Yeah, sometimes members of our family will do us harm. They will make life miserable for us. They won't help us when we need it. And it's so easy to just write family off. You know, I'm so disappointed in you. You have abandoned me. You have made me feel unsafe. You weren't there for me. And sometimes a spouse can say of their mate, you know, you weren't there for me when I needed you. Or children will say about their parents, you weren't there for me. I cried out to you and you said, get out of my face. There's a lot of disappointment in family. I don't know what you're going through right now, but maybe someone in your family is a big disappointment to you because they weren't there for you. They didn't make you feel safe. You know, we live in a mean, hostile world. And if you can't get help from home, where are you going to get help from? The world doesn't love you. I mean, there's this lie out in gangland that they are your family, but they don't love you. But sadly, there are young people who are driven to gangs because there's no love in their family either. The disappointment of family. Well, Joseph gets sold into slavery, and we enter into the next disappointment in his life, chapter 39, verses 1 through 21. Now, Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph. Underline that in your Bible. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him. Underline that. And that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put under his authority. So it was from the time that he had made him overseer of his house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. Now that's a lot of faith in somebody. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" He didn't say against Potiphar. He said sin against God. So it was, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, see, she didn't let up, that he did not heed her to lie with her or to be with her. But it happened about this time when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was inside. She probably dismissed them all. That she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." Now, let me pause and say, Joseph seems to have a problem with his clothing. First, it was the coat of many colors that got him into trouble. Now this garment, she grabs hold of that, right? But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. And so it was, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of the house and spoke to them, saying, "See, he has brought into us a Hebrew to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it happened that he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, and he left his garment with me and fled and went outside." So she kept his garment with her until his master came home. Then she spoke to him with words like these, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came in to me to mock me." So it happened, as I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled outside. So it was, when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, "Your servant did to me after this manner," that his anger was aroused. Then Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph. Underline that. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. The third disappointment that Joseph experiences is something's wrong here. It's the disappointment of injustice. The disappointment of injustice. Joseph was doing his job well. He was in Potiphar's house. He did his job so well that Potiphar entrusted everything to him. Can you imagine somebody who has some means saying, "Look, you can take care of my books. All I need to know is what I'm eating. Everything else about me is under your control." He does a great job because Potiphar watches Joseph, and he notices that everything that Joseph does prospers. And so he says, "I'm going to hitch my wagon to this guy because he's going to help me get blessed." He may not know God. He may not understand all the dynamics, but he is no fool. He sees that Joseph does well, and so he wants Joseph to make him do well. But Potiphar has a wife. And she probably had no responsibilities. All she did was just hang around the house. She sees this good-looking foreigner who's making her husband so prosperous. And she says, I got to get a piece of him. And so she begins to make advances to Joseph. But Joseph rebuffs the advances. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. I ain't got time for that. But she keeps the pressure on. It's like every day, Joseph, come lie with me. Come, nobody will know. No, I'm not going there. Leave me alone. So she figures, well, maybe he's just shy. I'll get everybody out the house. It'll just be him and me. Thank you. I do have one up here, but just him and me. And we can get this thing going on. You know, I just got to have this guy. You know, my husband likes him for his business expertise, but, you know, he's a good-looking man. And my husband, he's a prune. You know, he's all dried up. He you know, he doesn't excite me anymore. But this guy here, he's really exciting. So she tries to entrap him. Joseph, there's nobody else here. It's just you and me. And Joseph says, you know, your husband, my boss, has put everything under my control. He trusts me implicitly. I'm not going to violate that trust. Amen. There's only one thing that he has kept away from me for himself, and that is you. You are his wife. And I value the institution of marriage. I'm not going to violate that. So she doesn't want to hear that. So she grabs him by his clothes. Lie with me. Lady, get off of me. And he pulls away from her, and his coat comes off. And he's not going to stay around and retrieve it. He wants to get away from this witch. He runs out the door and leaves his coat behind. She is fuming. She is hot. And she's not used to people telling her no. And she said, I'm going to fix him. I'm going to get him. This is what I'm going to do. So she starts screaming, help, help, help. And the men come in. What's wrong, mistress? What's wrong, my lady? Yeah, that Hebrew that Potiphar brought into our house, he tried to take advantage of me. And look, he left his coat here. He was trying to get undressed, and he was trying to undress me. So that's the story she planted in the minds of these men. Yeah. Now remember, she probably had them dismissed so that there was nobody in the house except her and Joseph. Potiphar comes home, and she tells this sad story, this lie to him. Now, track with me. Potiphar is servant to Pharaoh, which means he has access to the most powerful man in the then known world. He is captain of the guard. Potiphar is no small guy. And not only that, he has responsibility for the king's prisoners. You know, not the lowly, people like you, the people who do B&Es and that kind of stuff. You know, they go to the lowest prison. These are for the special criminals, the political criminals. He has charge of that jail. Now, let me ask you a question, men. If you had power and authority, and you believed that somebody was trying to take advantage of your wife, what would you do? He'd be dead, huh? You're not going to send him to the cushy prison, are you? if you don't kill him, you will put him in the worst dungeon possible. I want to submit to you that Potiphar didn't believe his wife. But he was in a tough situation. You know, word's going to get out in society that this Hebrew young man tried to take advantage of Potiphar's wife, and Potiphar didn't do anything about it. So he's got to show something. He's got to do something. So he puts him in the prison that he's in control of. The point is, though, that God was with Joseph. God didn't leave him alone. Have you ever been falsely accused or cheated? Have you been the victim of some injustice? Are you paying for something that you didn't do? Life is like that. But how do you handle it? Joseph doesn't try to defend himself. He probably gave Potiphar a long look as if to say, you know what kind of man I am. You know what, I'll do anything for you to make you successful. Why would I mess with your wife? But he says nothing. God was with him. See, all along, even through the disappointments that Joseph is facing, God is working out his plan because God is always in control. We'll look at verse 22, Genesis 39. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority because the Lord was with him. Underline that. And whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. Underline that. Chapter 40. It came to pass after these things that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, who is Potiphar, into the prison, the place where Joseph was confined. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, so they were in custody for a while. Then the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, had a dream. Both of them, each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with its own interpretation. And Joseph came into them in the morning and looked at them and saw that they were sad. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the custody of his lord's house, saying, "Why do you look so sad today?" And they said to him, "We each have had a dream, and there is no interpreter of it." So Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me, please." Then the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, "Behold, in my dream a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches. It was as though it budded. Its blossoms shot forth, and the clusters brought forth ripe grapes. Then Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." Then Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Now within 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your place, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand according to the former manner, when you were his butler. But remember me when it is well with you, and please show kindness to me. Make mention of me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this house." And look at verse 23. Yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. So we won't even go into the baker who gets his head taken off. That was the interpretation of his dream. But what we see here is the disappointment of being forgotten. Joseph is given authority in the prison. Why? Because Joseph's character has not changed. Joseph is a hard worker. Joseph knows how to do things. He knows how to organize. He knows how to put things together. He knows how to make things work well. Even though he's not in the best of situations, he still does the best that he can do. And it gets noticed. You know, sometimes we find ourselves in a less than pleasing situation, and we mumble and grumble and complain, and we do nothing. I shouldn't have to sweep floors. I shouldn't have to clean up toilets. You see, if you do your job well, people will take notice of you and give you something better to do. Anyway, Joseph interprets their dreams. But notice what he says. Do not interpretations belong to God? Now, go back to when he had his dreams as a 17-year-old. He knew that that dream was from God. He knew that both of those dreams were from God, where he would one day be ruler over his brothers. So he asked the butler, please mention me to Pharaoh. I'm in this situation unjustly. I'm doing the best that I can, but I know that you're going to be elevated again. Put in a good word for me. Just as I've done something good for you, put in a good word for me. But the butler forgot about Joseph. Has someone forgotten about you? Have they forgotten what they promised to do for you? Have they failed to do you an important favor? Were you left out of something because they just forgot about you? Understand this. God doesn't forget. People may forget, but God doesn't forget. So let's look at this picture again. Here is Joseph. He gets disappointed as a teenager because his brothers and his father, they just don't understand. They misunderstand him. And sometimes when we are misunderstood, we just get disappointed. You would think that people would understand what you're trying to do, what you stand for, or where you're going. And when they don't, we get disappointed. But does that derail you? I hope not. And then he had the disappointment of his family. His brothers hated him. They sold him into slavery. They stopped up their ears when he was crying out for their help. Where he should have felt safe, he was not. And sometimes our families can hurt us. Sometimes they can put stumbling blocks in our way, and we get disappointed with members of our own family. And clearly there's a disappointment of injustice. You're doing the right thing, and bad things happen to you in response. And you say, why? Why? I'm doing the best that I can. And why am I being falsely accused? Why are these bad things happening to me? Because there's evil in this world. Satan wants to destroy you. He may not be able to revoke your salvation, but he certainly wants to kill you. And if he can't kill you, he wants to destroy your testimony. But all through this, Joseph, he kept in track with God. He did the best that he could, even in the face of injustice. And finally, it really is painful when people forget. When they make a promise to you and they don't deliver, and you were counting on it. You needed what they said they were going to deliver to you, and they just forgot about you. That is disappointing. That can make you stop trusting in people. But not Joseph. You know how the story ends. Pharaoh has two dreams, and nobody in the kingdom can interpret it. And so all of a sudden the butler says, 2 years ago, there was this guy in prison who told me the interpretation of my dream. Perhaps he can help you. 2 years later, he was forgotten for 2 years. They send for Joseph. Joseph listens to Pharaoh's dreams. He gives the interpretation of the dream, and And Pharaoh's blown away by this man's intelligence. And he says, well, we need somebody to organize. If there's going to be 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine, and we need to store up stuff during the 7 years of plenty so that we can make it through the 7 years of famine, who are we going to get to do this job? And Pharaoh says, hello, he's right here. This guy, he interpreted the dream. Who is better suited than this guy? Again, Joseph's track record of being responsible and doing the right thing has won out. So he becomes number 2 in Egypt, which means he's number 2 in the world, the then known world. And when the famine comes and his father sends his brothers to get grain, who did they have to come to? Joseph. And Joseph, he's not in disguise. He's taking on the culture of Egypt, but they don't recognize him. They actually do bow down to him. They bow down to him, and he knows them, but they don't know him. But the end of the story, I think it's Genesis 50:15. If I don't look at it, you're going to say I'm a false prophet. See, it's not 50:15. See, 50:19 and 20. Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive." See, Genesis 50:20 is the Old Testament version of Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to them who are the called, to them who love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. All things work together for good to them that love God. Unbelievers can't make that claim, but believers can. What disappointment you're facing, it may be because somebody doesn't like you. They don't understand you. They hate your guts. They want to create problems for you. They're willing to tell a lie on you, or they just simply forget you. Don't worry. God is in control. What they mean for evil, God will turn for good. And so the point of this message is, let God turn disappointments into victories. Whatever disappointment you're going through, just give it to the Lord. That's what Joseph did. I mean, he gave it over to the Lord. He kept on doing the right thing. Don't become bitter. Don't become lazy because, hey, if I do good, it doesn't matter, so I might as well do bad or do nothing. No, that's the wrong thinking. Keep on doing the right thing and turn the matter over to the Lord. Maybe you're disappointed in your life, where it's going. If Jesus is not your Savior, you should be disappointed with your life. You can't save yourself, and you are on a collision course to hell. You may have tried to make yourself better, but it's not going to work. You found that to be a big disappointment. How many times have you made resolutions? I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to stop that, and, I'm going to be a better person. Those things don't work. But let me tell you that Jesus can save your soul. Admit that you're a sinner, receive him as your Savior today, and he will give you life eternal. But for my sisters and brothers, be honest. Something is disappointing you right now, whether it's something small or something big. It could be you're hungry, and I'm still talking. Do you believe that God is with you? If so, let him turn your disappointment into victory. Give it to him and trust him to bless you. Name that disappointment right now. And I encourage you to silently pray and give it to him. Don't hold on to it. Don't continue to be angry. Don't hold a grudge. God is with you if you're his child, and he is in control. Let's pray.